Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 86.
So, Ben, I'm gonna mix it up. In April of 1986, a very important thing in history happened.
Okay, I was 9 years old. I might remember it. What was it?
It was the Chernobyl disaster in the USSR.
Yeah, in modern-day Ukraine.
Yes. So, everybody knows that Chernobyl is a thing, and it was some kind of reactor meltdown at a nuclear power plant that caused ridiculous devastation. But it was actually kind of interesting reading in just some of the details. And when I say details, I mean like the most surface level that you can get.
Okay, because I've read a whole book about this, but go ahead.
Every time. It never fails. It doesn't matter what I'm trying to talk about or how much effort I put into it. You've already know it. It's like, oh yeah, I actually wrote 3 essays about that for my graduate degree.
The book was called Nuclear Disasters. It's a fantastic book, highly recommended, but go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm going to do a quick synopsis of what happened, and you can correct me when I misspeak.
Sure.
So they were performing a safety test on one of the systems about the reactor. But then during that test, the output of the reactor accidentally dropped way too low. Like it dropped lower than they were expecting it to. So then they were trying to ramp it back up to recover after abandoning the safety test. But then in ramping it back up, I guess they hit it too hard and they exceeded some safety limits to try to get it back up. So then they tried to do an emergency shutdown. But a flaw in the design caused localized parts of the reactor to start increasing reactivity instead of shutting down. And so then those localized areas had like super increased temperatures, which ruptured fuel channels, which then decreased the coolant pressure, which allowed the coolant to then flash from a liquid to steam, which reduced its effectiveness, which increased the reactor activity, which increased the temperature again, and created this positive feedback loop where the entire reactor exploded in a steam explosion.
Yeah, and spread fallout across, several hundred square miles.
Yes, and I thought that was the extent of it, that the reactor exploded and there was fallout. But apparently, after the building exploded and the core was exposed to open air, it was apparently on fire and just burned uncontrollably until May 4th. For like a couple of weeks, it just sat there and burned and just put out another 50% of all of its contaminants or whatever in the air.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's hard to quantify how many people have died as a direct result of this whole debacle, but the most widely cited source is the study that the World Health Organization did, that with the fatalities that happened at the event itself and then projecting all of the health effects of the lingering radiation, they're saying 4,000 people fatalities can be attributed to this disaster.
Yes. There's so many rabbit trails we could go off with this, but there's only one I want to go down right now, and it's one I think you and I are both on, and that is including all 4,000 of those deaths and all other accidental deaths that have occurred in the history of nuclear power production. It is still the safest form of energy.
Infinitesimally small when compared to the amount of coal miners that have died trying to dig that crap out of the earth.
Yep.
That's funny that you would bring that up, and when I bring up that same point with self-driving cars, you're like, nope, I don't want any part of that. That logic doesn't apply over here.
No, I don't. I don't think I know what you're talking about. I'm in favor of self-driving cars.
Yeah, we had this discussion. You were setting clear limits about, I said, if self-driving cars are any amount better than human drivers, I say we accept it, and you say they need to be at least twice as good as human drivers.
Yes, I think self-driving cars and nuclear power fall into this same area where it's like this mysterious thing we don't understand, and so it has to be significantly safer than the alternative before people will be willing to accept it. But they're coming around. I heard a podcast interview recently of a person who was a reformed anti-nuclear activist who now is pro-nuclear energy for all the reasons we just talked about.
Yeah, nuclear reactors are that's going to be our link to get to the renewables, to get to the point where we're actually using the net zero or the good energy production. Like in the middle of that is
the distant nuclear reactor instead of one nearby.
Yeah. Well, we have a nuclear reactor not too far outside of Phoenix, Palo Verde power plant that supplies power for the nearest 3 states.
Yeah, but it's been 3 decades since we built a new nuclear reactor in the United States, and we've learned a lot since then. I bet we could do a much better job.
I've seen that. I've seen people talk about how all of the reactors that are operating are from decades old designs, and there are much better designs that we could do now, but it's all about the money. It takes time and resources to build a nuclear reactor to the point where they're going to be fighting like that PR fight the entire time before it comes online and actually starts producing in a safe way.
Yeah, we'll see. I think mankind's demands for energy will increase to the point where we won't really have any other choice.
Oh, we'll put giant solar collectors in space and beam it down to the surface.
But like you said, in order to get to that, we're going to need some nuclear energy.
I do believe that, yes.
Well, humankind just passed their 8 billionth living human on planet Earth. So congratulations, people. Well done.
Congratulations to humans. There's now 8 billion of us, and we're no better off.
How was your Thanksgiving, Josh? We're recording here on the 26th of November. Thanksgiving was a bit early this year since it's always on the fourth Thursday in November for you, those of our listeners that are not American. So this year it was on the 24th.
Yeah. Before we go any farther into that, I want to say that this is a pattern we should have all holidays follow. There are a bunch of American holidays where you get off of work that are a set schedule like that. It's like, oh, it's always the first Monday, or it's always the third Thursday, or whatever. But there are some holidays that don't, like Halloween. For some reason, Halloween is always the 31st, regardless of whether or not that's like on a Monday, which is the worst day of the week to have Halloween. Like, it should just be the last Saturday in October. It just should be. Anyway, my Thanksgiving
year, we need to add that to our list of causes that we're passionate about here on the Bad at Magic podcast.
Well, I'm sure I'll be less passionate about it when I stop trick-or-treating with my kids in group costumes. But for now, that needs to be Saturday night.
And that's like you being from Arizona and how much you care about daylight savings time.
Very little, actually. I care very little about daylight savings time. So Thanksgiving this year, it was really nice because for the first time in many years, we were able to get my wife's side of the family together. And so they all came out to our house and we hosted them. And some of them had to leave today. Some of them are still here. And it's just really good to get to see everybody. And so I was really thankful for that. And I did the normal thing where I spent the day in the kitchen. There's a tradition that I have. I probably talked about on the podcast where I accidentally always forget to get something at the store, and I have to dart out real quick in the middle of the day at Thanksgiving to get a thing and or maybe grab a beer with my dad for half an hour before we go back to the families. But it all went down really, really well.
Well, you also did a 10K that morning. When did you have time for all that?
Oh, well, okay. So the 10K, that's a thing. Like, I didn't even mention it because that's just Thanksgiving. We have a turkey trot in our town. That's what if there is a race on Thanksgiving Day, it's called Turkey Trot. That's just what it is. And so our town does a 5K and a 10K. And the way I see it is if you get up, at the crack of dawn and go run 6 miles as part of a road race, I mean, the rest of the feasting, all of the excess alcohol and calories that you're going to take in the rest of the day, that's all guilt-free.
Josh, I hate to break it to you, but the 10K only burns about 700 calories.
Maybe for you, Ben, but I'm a big dude, and it takes a lot to haul this carcass 6 miles.
All right, so which of your sides that you worked so hard on turned out best this year?
Ooh, man, I'll tell you, I am a sucker for green bean casserole, Ben. I love it. In fact, this year
I made a double batch this year.
Definitely. I was shopping for green bean casserole, and I actually bought a bunch extra because I thought, this has 3 ingredients and takes 5 minutes to whip up. I'm going to make this just randomly throughout the year.
I made the mistake one year of trying to improve upon green bean casserole by starting with like fresh green beans and adding bacon to the recipe and making my own cream of mushroom soup. And it ruined it, Josh. It ruined it. It's just best when it comes out of cans and bags.
Yeah, it's 3 ingredients. You can't screw it up. And I thought about the same thing. Like, there's got to be some way to enhance this recipe, but then at the same time, like, why? Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right. It's delicious. Yeah, so listeners, if you've never had it and you want to taste some real American food, like not a cheeseburger, you want some real American food, have them make you some green bean casserole.
Yep, they'll open 3 cans in front of you, and you'll think to yourself, this can't possibly be good.
That's how I felt about some of my favorites when I would kind of do that thing where you're giving something to a European and you sit there holding your breath wondering if they're going to like it too, and of course they don't because they've never tasted it before and it's not part of their culture experience and they're trying to be polite, but you can tell they don't like it.
Somebody that was here commented on my sweet potatoes. Like, these sweet potatoes are great. I'm like, thank you. It's your mom's recipe. I stole it from her years ago when I made it with her at Thanksgiving, like when I was in Kansas. And then the response I got was, oh, so this is what, 50% brown sugar by weight? And I said, yeah, at least that.
That's because sweet potatoes are gross. Like, if you have to add 50% sugar by weight, then they need a referendum on their name.
Okay, now
sweet nothing.
Dial that back. I'm a big believer in sweet potatoes. For a long time, I used to just slice sweet potatoes raw and just like sprinkle some olive oil on them and bake them and just have my own sweet potato chips.
Wow.
So it's the Thanksgiving version of sweet potatoes that needs to be over the top sweet to balance all the salty sides that you're having.
So I want to. Okay, so for our non-American listeners, Thanksgiving is probably the premier feast holiday for Americans. Goes back. It has a fraught history and connections to colonization and relationships with Native Americans and all that kind of stuff. We're just gonna abstract all that away for now. This is a holiday when Americans traditionally feast and gather together in families in Thanksgiving for all of their blessings and the things in their life that they're grateful for.
Yep. You sit around, you eat too much, you drink too much, you watch football, and like in the middle of arguing about politics, you also say what you're thankful for about your family.
Right. Yeah. We didn't argue about politics. I'll tell you about our argument we had in a little while. So, and then there's become this kind of pantheon of traditional dishes that go along with this meal. Obviously, cooking a turkey is probably premier amongst them. Some people also cook a ham. We tend to do both just because of the number of people we typically have. Mashed potatoes goes with those, and gravy as well. Green bean casserole is mentioned. Stuffing, as in bits of crumbled bread with seasoning. Mm-hmm. Cranberry sauce, a big favorite around my house with me. Then probably some kind of fresh baked bread, rolls we made. Yeah. What others would you add?
The only one that I can think of is pie. You have to have pie.
And lots of pie.
I think my wife made 5 different kinds of pie this year.
Okay, Josh. So that transitions perfectly in what I wanted to talk about. So my family and I were sitting around in between Thanksgiving dinner where we ate all of the savory foods and we were waiting for our stomachs to make room for the pie, which was we had Thanksgiving dinner at like 12:30, so pie was dinner that night.
This is the part of the holiday that makes it American. Oh, I ate so much food that I had to wait a little while before I could eat more of the food.
So we were sitting around and we were talking about pie, like what makes pie pie and why is it good? And then we got into this debate that there is an attribute of pie that we don't have a way to adequately describe. So we decided we were going to define our own pie attribute.
Okay, so you're talking about there is some characteristic of pie that people don't talk about or don't measure?
Yeah, there isn't an elegant way to measure, so we tried to come up with one. So we spent a while brainstorming. I'll tell you how it works.
Okay.
The measurement is called pie-tegrity.
Pie-tegrity, okay.
Pie-tegrity. And what pie-tegrity measures is how small of a piece of the overall thing is representative of the whole.
Okay, so how thin of a slice of pie can you eat where... What, you can identify that it's that pie or that you have enough taste or flavor of that pie to be satisfied?
That second one.
Okay.
That you have enough of the overall thing in a single slice to have represent the thing. So
it's a subjective measure.
It kind of, but we tried to be objective about it. So for instance, it's a numeric scale ranging from 1 to 32, as in how many pieces it is from the original whole. So a pie, of course, starts as a circle, and if you can cut it into 0 pieces before it starts losing some of its identity, then it has a pie-tegrity of 1.
So a pie with pie-tegrity 1 means you have to sit and eat the entire pie in order to get that feeling of I just ate this pie.
Yes. So can you think of a pie with a pie-tegrity of 1?
The only thing, this doesn't make any sense, but I'm thinking of like a meat pie, like a small meat pie that like fits in your hand.
Yes, a chicken pot pie.
Yes.
1, because they're small, and 2, because like when you cut it, the gravy starts to leak out, and maybe you didn't get potatoes or a chunk of chicken or whatever. So in order to get the chicken pot pie experience, you need to eat the whole thing. So it has a pie integrity of 1.
Dude, what's hilarious is I'm not looking at the notes. Like, I just scrolled down to see what you've listed as pie integrity of 1. Like, nobody's going to believe me. Ben's not even going to believe me.
You came up with it spontaneously.
Yes, I came up with it spontaneously.
Awesome.
It was not scripted.
Okay, so we decided the smallest individual slice you could slice it into was probably a 32nd of an overall pie. That is, taking a pie, cutting it 4 times so that you've got 8 pieces, then cutting those pieces in half, and then cutting those pieces in half.
4, 8, 16.
16, 32.
That's like a sliver.
Yes. So can you think of any kinds of pie that would have a pie integrity of 32?
So I'm going to stop looking at the notes. It would have to be incredibly rich. Or it would have to be very powerfully flavorful. So the only things that come to my mind are some of my son's favorite pies. My son is a huge fan of like cheesecakes, which are really, really thick. And then maybe like a key lime pie, something really sharp that really comes at you.
Yes, those both have very high pie integrity. The one we chose with the highest is pumpkin.
Really?
A well-mixed pumpkin pie, you can just slice it and it just still has all of the ingredients and pieces together, and even a very, very thin piece, you're still getting the pumpkin pie experience.
Well, hang on. Are we talking about like hot pumpkin pie fresh from the oven? Are we talking about
cooled pumpkin pie that's had time to congeal? You know, it's an egg-based pie with squash and spices, and then it has and cheesecake also has a very high pie integrity, a pie integrity of 32.
I feel like we need to have a throwdown over hot versus cold and a la mode versus plain.
So you're right about this. We decided that pies that had a top crust as well as a bottom crust would tend to have a lower pie integrity because the likelihood that they would fall apart was higher.
That's true. Yes, I agree. Like a solid apple pie. Like, it doesn't take much to feel like an apple pie, but it's really tough to keep that nice lattice work of dough on top, so you need a larger slice.
Right, exactly. So an apple pie, like you said, with big chunks of apple inside, it probably gets no lower than a pie integrity of no higher than a pie integrity of 12.
Okay, I can see that.
So if you cut the pie into any more than 12 pieces, you start having problems where like you don't get both the top and the bottom crust, or the pieces of apple slide out, or whatever.
Now, to get 12 slices out of a pie, you have to start with 3 slices instead of 2, and I don't know what kind of a nut job is cutting their pie into 6 pieces. That's just weird.
Yeah, but you could do that.
I mean, you could do it if you're a mathematician or like a Dungeons and Dragons nerd.
Cut it into 6, and then you cut those in half, and then that's a pie integrity of 12. Okay, so what would you say is the standard pie fraction?
The standard pie fraction is base 2. It has to be, because you cut the pie in half, and then you turn it 90 degrees, and then you cut it in half again.
Okay.
It's easy to judge 90 degrees by eye. It is not easy to judge 60 or 30 degrees by eye.
Right, so let's imagine you cut a pie like that. You have 4 pieces, pie integrity of 4. Are there any pies you can think of where you would actually do that? Cut it into 4 pieces.
You would need 4, like you would cut a pie into 4 pieces and serve up a fourth of a pie. Like jokingly, maybe like an ice cream cake.
Maybe.
This is just, I don't know if this is just because this goes back to how much of this pie do I want versus how much of the pie do I need before I feel like, yes, I ate enough of this pie.
Right. So what is the standard then? If you said it's base 2, but it's not 4.
Yeah, it's not 4. It's I would say it's either 8 or 16. I think is the standard. If you take a pie, you slice it in half, rotate it, cut it in half again. Now you've got 4 pieces. If you cut those in half again, that gives you what, 16 pieces?
8.
Yeah, it gives you 8 pieces. So that's probably it. That's probably the standard.
So I would say, I agree with you. I would say 8 is the standard for sweet pies. So we were trying to figure out what pies have a pie integrity of no higher than 8. Like if you cut them any more than 8, they no longer have pie integrity.
Okay, well, I know my sister-in-law is a huge fan of like pudding pies, where it's essentially like a crust and then just like pudding in the middle.
Mixed a little bit thicker than usual so that it kind of holds together.
Yeah, hopefully it sets and doesn't fall apart. But like even that, I feel like
a vanilla cream pie or a banana cream pie or a chocolate pie.
Like a chocolate cream pie is her specific favorite. And so,
you think those have a pie integrity of 8?
I think I think any less than that, and it would just fall apart, and it would just be you're eating a spoonful of pudding.
I kind of want to put those up in like the 12 or 16 range.
where you can have a 16th and it's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's too small. I think
if it's chilled well.
I don't know. Again, I feel like I'm just going to, like, if I get a sliver, like a tiny little wedge of a pudding pie, I'm just going to scoop all of the pudding up in one scoop of the fork and be like, well, I'm out of pudding.
Yeah, but you're missing the point. The pie integrity is if you have a 16th of it and you take a bite of it, are you experiencing the same as someone who has a fourth?
I get that you're saying that you have this kind of weird, ill-defined experience, like based apparatus that you're defining this number by. What I'm defining this number by is this, Ben. How much of this pie do I have before I go, instead of, oh?
That is a different measurement. We can come up with a name for that one later. So there are some pies that we decided that any higher than 8 no longer have pie integrity, like a cherry pie. It has a top crust and a bottom crust and big cherries inside. And if you cut any smaller than that, they like roll out or they don't fit inside. Or, you know.
But are you still, but like the experience, according to you, like I'm still getting crust, I'm still getting cherries. Yeah, it's no longer in a slice, but I'm still getting all that.
Another good example is peach pie, because those tend to be pretty big slices and not well congealed, so they could, just make a mess. A mixed berry pie, if you have an eighth of a pie that's a mixed berry pie, you're probably going to get at least one of each kind of berry. But if you get any smaller than that, you're approaching the odds that you're not going to get them all.
How many people engage in this debate at your Thanksgiving table?
At least 5.
You see, I feel like I should come to your Thanksgivings. Because, like, if that question was broached at one of my Thanksgivings, I would immediately break out a spreadsheet and a whiteboard and be, like, at the front of the room, like, trying to hammer this down with, like, consensus.
Yeah.
And I would be promptly ignored by everyone in my
Oh,
suite.
man, you would get along famously with this group. So we decided, along with pumpkin and cheesecake, which have the highest pie integrity of approaching 32, then there's the next tier down that are like sweet potato, French silk, lemon meringue, a non-standard pie, a cheese pizza, has a very high pie integrity.
We're bringing pizza pie into this?
Coconut cream pie. And then slightly below that, then you've got like key lime. And the only reason I put key lime lower than French silk, sweet potato, those kind of pies was because it has a graham cracker crust. Which is
yes. Notoriously
slightly
crumbly.
Yes. Have you ever had chess pie?
Chess pie? No, I haven't.
Chess pie is a southern dish that was an adaptation of a British recipe where it's a custard pie that you brown so that it gets a crusty, caramelized crust on top. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Pecan pie, there's another one that kind of has problems because it tends to have whole nuts on top.
You mean
doesn't
pecan
cut
pie?
very well. Yeah. Let the debates begin. Now, strawberry pie, there's 2 kinds. You might have a strawberry pie where there's like sliced strawberries that cut easily, or strawberries that are like whole berries.
Ooh, okay.
And strawberry pie with whole berries has a very low pie integrity.
Yeah, just the same as all these other fruit pies that have large chunks of fruit.
Yeah. But at the bottom is a chicken pot pie, which has a pie integrity of 1, and at the top is pumpkin pie that has a pie integrity of 32.
I'll tell you right now, I prefer the well-diced, well-mixed pies, like a sweet potato pie.
So
where
you
want...
like pies that have a higher pie integrity?
Yes, and I want to experience the whole pie in one bite. Maybe that's the question. If you get like an apple pie, you're either getting crust or you're getting apple, but it's hard to get both because of the chunkiness of it, right?
But that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you prefer pies with a higher pie integrity?
Maybe I do. But I also prefer it with like a whipped topping on top to like cut some of the denseness of the pie itself. I want my pies to be hot, and I want my toppings on them to be cold.
Well, some people, when they say pie, they could mean pizza. And when British people say pie, they generally mean a savory meat-based pie. But when Americans say pie, they mean a sweet pie like you would eat at Thanksgiving time.
I mean, yes, in America, we think pie is sweet. At the same time, I would like my culture to have more savory pies. I'm a huge fan of savory pies.
Like a quiche?
Like chicken pot pie, like you mentioned. My wife makes a homemade from-scratch chicken pot pie that is so good. The last time she made it, she made 8 of them, okay? And with the intent of giving 4 of them to other people, like 2 to one household and 2 to another household. And I was genuinely upset when I found out she gave away half of our chicken pot pies.
Nicole, your cooking gets a really good show on this podcast. Yeah. All right. Well, Josh prefers high integrity pies. I like to mix it up a little bit. In fact, if I was going to put if there was 20 pies at Thanksgiving and I was going to put 3 pieces on my plate, I would like to have a low integrity piece, a mid integrity piece, and a high integrity piece.
Is there a reason for that, or is that just because you can think of pies in those categories that you would like to eat? But
I mean,
guess what?
You could make an apple pie where it was like applesauce pie.
Yeah. But Ben, look me in the eye and tell me if you saw 20 pies that the first thing, like not even the first thing, like in the top 5 criteria of things that you're balancing to figure out which, like there's 20 pies in front of you, you get 3 pieces. The pie integrity does not even enter the equation for calculating which ones you want.
It kind of does.
Really?
It's like the smoothness and the homogeneity of it.
Is that the pie integrity, or is that just consistency? Like, did you come up with a fancy new way to talk about the consistency?
Well, no, because there's other parts of it, like whether or not it has a top and a bottom crust, or what the crust consists of. It wraps all of that into a single measurement. It's revolutionary.
This is kind of reminding me of something I saw in a YouTube video, and they called it the perfect bite eating method. And what this person does is whenever they get a plate of food, doesn't matter what the food is, they take a minute and they identify what is the perfect bite of this plate that encompasses what this meal is. Like I can scoop it up in one forkful and I can take a bite and it will be that meal, right? They identify and they isolate this perfect bite and then they eat everything else. And then the very last thing they eat, the last bite of the plate is the quote unquote perfect bite.
Nice. That sounds awesome. Link in the show notes. Okay. Well, let me know, listeners, if you use Pietegrity or if you want to weigh in on it. I'd be interested to know.
You have had way more pies in your life than I have. Like, just you describing all these different pies, like I've had 4 or 5 types total. And then you're going off on, I've never heard of a chess pie. I've never heard of, like, the mixed berry. Like, I've probably heard of it, but I've never seen a mixed berry pie.
Have you ever had rhubarb pie?
I don't. That sounds delicious.
Coconut cream?
Probably. No, I know what it is, but never had it.
Right.
Banana cream I've had because it's got Nilla wafers on top.
Well, whether or not it has Nilla wafers influences its Pietegrity score. It needs to be at least the width of a full vanilla wafer.
Hang on a second. I bring up toppings and a la mode and hot versus cold, and you just like brush us off. That's another conversation. But then the Nilla wafers versus no Nilla wafers, that's counted for? That's in the equation?
Yes.
Killing me, Smalls.
All right, Josh, last time I forgot to mention to you, you and I talked about military uniforms, and I forgot to mention when I was doing research for it, I found this great article on Wikipedia about military uniforms, but I found out that deep down, probably about 10 pages deep, there was a section about the U.S. Air Force uniforms, and it had not yet been updated to reflect the change that was made 2 years ago when the Air Force mandatorily switched over to the optical camouflage pattern that the Army uses.
Okay.
It still said that the Air Force wears the Airman Battle Uniform.
Ben, I don't want to hear the rest of this.
So of course I edited the Wikipedia article to make it right. But I found some content that was 2 years out of date. Like, what is this? Has the internet failed us?
You were 10 pages deep into Wikipedia. What kind of psychopath is still reading, like sipping tea with their smoking jacket on in the evening leisure time, just like keep scrolling on their iPad forever and ever? Like, oh, this article about Air Force camouflage is 2 years out of date. This must be corrected.
And I cited my sources too. So the thing about it was, I didn't feel betrayed by it, but it was stale information. So I found an article that it linked to that was a dedicated article to the Air Force uniforms, and it was correct. And this one was a spur that was just about military uniforms in general that happened to have a little bit of information about Air Force uniforms. So I think, and I'm sure Wikipedia keeps this as one of their like style guidelines, which is information like that in a spur article should refer to the source article rather than contain a bit of the source article so that it has the likelihood to become stale.
That makes sense. Like, don't quote something if you can link it, because then if the link's, assuming the link stays up to date, then that's going to be more relevant than the quote.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know if there's a Wikipedia style guide, Ben, because I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Wikipedia is just run by the internet. Like,
no, there's definitely a style guide.
There is this wonderful study about how Wikipedia shouldn't exist. Like, it is counter to everything else we know about internet culture. It makes no sense that Wikipedia is not a dumpster fire of just like constant hate speech.
It's a Festivus miracle. Have you ever seen one of those little things on a Wikipedia article that's like a little exclamation mark and says this article is too much in conversational tone or contains too many sentences without a link or something like that? That's the AI flagging it for the community to correct it.
Which is impressive and indicative that you spend way more time on Wikipedia than I do.
Well, a great Wikipedia article I read this week was about the 2022 FIFA World Cup. Are you following this saga, Josh?
Okay, props for your transition. That was awesome. But so as far as the World Cup goes, I am aware that it is happening, and I am aware of the political, like, just all the, like, the human rights activists, like, all of the stuff that's kind of happening in the background with this. Like, there's this event that's happening, and that's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is how and why it's there.
Yes. So let's talk about it. So every 4 years, the world, probably with the exception of America, cares about the soccer equivalent of the Olympics. All eyes are turned towards some location chosen by the Fédération Internationale Football Association, or whatever FIFA stands for, and everyone goes there. 4 years ago, it was Russia, and they hold a kind of round-robin tournament ending in some nation's football players being crowned as the champions of the world. And it is pretty legit as far as like feeling like it has determined the winner that year.
Oh, I mean, there's no doubt. You can't argue with just a straight round-robin tournament with the best players from a country against each other. Like, you can't argue that being the best way to figure out who's the best at soccer this year.
Yes, and it's a big deal. Like, everybody's watching it.
Yes, I'm aware that soccer is an enormous phenomenon in every country but this one.
So I don't know what the selection criteria are for determining what country will host it, but you think there's kind of a list of values, almost like Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, where you want to pick a country that maybe hasn't had a chance before and wants a moment on the world stage, but you don't want them to be such a small or backwards country that it feels like you're promoting values that the world doesn't embrace, or that they're perhaps stressing their infrastructure or their economy too much to the point where it's untenable.
Have you not watched the HBO documentary about this? There's two different ones. John Oliver did a bit, and then also HBO's got that sports guy. I can't remember his name, but he did a deep dive onto this whole the entire like selection of Qatar.
Okay, yeah. So we hadn't even said that name yet. Yes, it's in Qatar this year. It's usually during the summer, and of course, already we have problems because in Qatar, I was there back in 2016, and I think for a month consecutively, the temperature never dropped below 100 degrees at night. Yeah, that's 40 degrees Celsius for my friends in the UK.
So they were saying that like the average high or something was like 126 degrees Fahrenheit or 52 Celsius or something like that. Which
isn't just bad for playing football, soccer.
That's deadly.
It's right. You could die.
So you listed all these criteria, like, oh, we want to prop this country up and like you're talking about, and give them an opportunity to be the world stage. But these HBO documentaries made it very clear that, one, Qatar paid off like several of the members of the board on FIFA that were going to vote to see who should get the World Cup. Two, they were putting forth what at the time were logistically infeasible plans to host the World Cup because like the city that the World Cup is taking place in did not exist 10 years ago when they applied. And then three, the ex-head of FIFA is on record. Like actual direct quote is, "It's easier and better for us to host the World Cup in an authoritative regime rather than a democratic one. Because It's just administratively easier."
Yeah, I think I saw that same quote. Okay, so let's take those one at a time. So first of all, the the thing about it being selected at Qatar is when you look at the other entrants and you don't see any clear criteria for how they should have been picked, there's no logical reason why Qatar should have been picked. They didn't have the infrastructure. The weather was horrible. They don't really have a tradition of football. They aren't a major player on the world stage, and yet they won. So imagine, the members of the voting committee at the table as the Qatari representatives pass and walking away with just cash falling out of every pocket and crevice,
Yeah, for real.
There's no doubt that there was corruption and bribery involved in this selection, and the committee has been so unapologetic about it.
Yeah. FIFA traditionally very closed mouth and we made this selection, deal with it. They don't have to justify themselves to anybody. I think they've got that right.
Right. They're like, yeah. I don't know that they didn't outright deny bribery or just, like you said, just kind of hand wave it. Be like, this is what we're doing. We're going to Qatar.
How do you explain that 3 of the voting members were randomly giving $1 million each from a Qatar national during the week of voting? It's that's completely unrelated and you have no way of proving otherwise. Next question.
Yeah. So the first thing they had to do is reschedule it, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Josh, it's crazy. The whole world does this every 4 years, and it's we're rescheduling the Summer Olympics to the winter. Now, that being said, I think we've had the Summer Olympics in the Southern Hemisphere, and I think they do that when they go to the Southern Hemisphere.
The dates do move, and that's the thing. Since it only happens once every 4 years, it's not you're making plans in advance. You're not a season ticket holder, and all of a sudden you got screwed out of your flight because you got it in advance. You knew a long time ago that this was going to take place in the winter and not the summer.
Yes. However, and I like the way you said that, you're not a season ticket holder that got screwed out of your flight. Yes, but everyone that went to Qatar thinking they were going to have a traditional World Cup soccer fan experience got screwed.
Ooh.
Because the nation of Qatar is very backward when it comes to anything you would think of as Western sports fan culture.
So this is going to be me as an ignorant American with a very limited scope and knowledge of the rest of the world saying this. But welcome to the Middle East, buckos. This is how crap works here. It's all grift, it's all corruption, and it's all what I say goes for no other reason because I am holding the biggest stick in the area at this moment. Yeah, exactly. So their culture is very, like you said, authoritarian, and their more public morality is so oppressive. Even when I was there as a military person with a tight haircut, no romantic connections, and not drinking, I still felt like there was someone looking over my shoulder waiting for me to slip up and do something wrong. And listeners, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, Ben being worried about being the morally upstanding one in the room, that should give you pause.
It is not a good place. I saw this one review and of someone talking about going to the city of Doha as a tourist destination, and he basically just said that it was aggressively dull.
It didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, Doha did, but you're talking about some of the villages they set up to house stadiums in order to have venues for the World Cup to play.
Gotcha.
Because the next site in 2026 where it's going to be held is North America, as in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And they're using existing stadiums, 3 in Mexico, 1 in Canada, and the other 12 or something in the United States. And they're all major cities you've heard of.
I guarantee those 12 stadiums are not dedicated soccer stadiums in America.
No. And there will be a big hullabaloo over how well prepared the grass is. That being said, Qatar sucks as a destination. The weather is terrible. The women's rights,
non-existent. There aren't any.
LGBTI rights, forget
about it.
There aren't
any. Non-existent. Actively criminalized.
Actively criminalized. And all of the controversy surrounding the way that they went about building up their infrastructure from the time they were selected until the opening of the games. And that is through migrant labor.
Not just migrant labor, but through what they call the Khalifa system, which is essentially indentured servitude.
In the most corrupt and terrible kind of way. Poor living conditions, extremely long hours, unable to leave, low pay, and then just deaths.
Yeah, just people dying.
if reports are to be believed, it's somewhere over 6,000 deaths have occurred since in the constructing of these venues alone.
And that's the thing, is there's no excuse for it, like these human rights atrocities. And this is, at the same time, like, what's going to happen? Like, oh, shame on you, Qatar, for doing this thing. Like, as soon as the World Cup is over, the next day, everyone on Earth is going to forget that Qatar is a place.
Yeah, I don't know what they thought would come out of this, especially once, like, everyone thought they were going to go and be able to drink a beer at their seat in the stadium and take off their shirt and reveal their painted chest and kiss their girlfriend on TV. But the Qataris aren't having it, any of it. Did you see the clip of them harassing the Danish journalists?
Yes, where he was just filming on like the road where he had
on a street corner.
On a street corner, like,
and he's wearing a press credential around his neck.
And he pulled out his like signed certificate and like permission to do all the things that he was doing. And those people were like, "No, we don't care. We don't care about any of that," because and this is the thing that we need to get through. It doesn't matter that guy legally had the right to do what he was doing. That doesn't matter. The guys that pulled up said he shouldn't be doing what he's doing, and they were, in that little tiny 30-square-foot area, the highest authority. And so what they said went regardless of the rule of law.
So what you just described is something a friend of mine told me. When I was in Qatar in 2006, I had a friend who was a Harvard Law graduate who was the Judge Advocate General to the Wing Commander. And he said, all these things you're describing are characteristic of a third world nation.
Yep, that sounds
high
right.
Degree of corruption, low commitment to the rule of law, superstition. All these kinds of things are characteristic of a third world nation.
Well, and like, I think about that happening here in America. Like, if some thugs just went up to like a reporter and started like bullying him, all it would take is that guy to shout, and you would have just as many bystanders coming in and be like, "Hey, you can't give this guy guff just because
he's just a reporter."
Yeah, he's just a reporter. He's doing his job. Get out of here. He's got his permits or whatever. Like, the idea of like rules mean things is so ingrained into us that's just part of the way of life here.
So my personal experience with this goes pretty deep. So the first time I was there, I was part of the base comm squadron, and one of the things we operated on Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar was the regional mail hub that took in all of the mail for all of the soldiers in Iraq and the surrounding countries that were doing operations. So the mail would fly into Doha International Airport, and it would pass through Qatari customs. Then we bring it to the distribution facility, divide it up by where it was supposed to go after that, and then maybe fly it out on planes or drive it out on trucks so it would get where it needed to go. But our experience with customs was characteristically exactly like what we're describing, where the people that were there and were enforcing the air quotes rules changed said rules every day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Today, your form needs a blue stamp. Yesterday, it needed a red stamp. That will be 40, whatever their money is. I don't remember what it's called. Rial. And it just changed day after day after day. And let me tell you something, Josh. The United States is like the polar opposite of that. We establish procedures and follow them, and everyone relies on them and expects them to be the same. So the United States Air Force doesn't have any way of doing what is essentially paying some low-level bureaucrat a bribe. So when we show up at the gate with the mail truck and they tell us we can't get through today unless we buy a yellow stamp, the Air Force goes, "That's a bribe, we're not paying it." And you come to an impasse.
It's just a screeching halt.
Yeah.
And from their perspective, if they want it, they'll pay it. From your perspective, it's like, we don't even have a bureaucratic channel to request a bribe.
Yeah. There's no vehicle for us to write. There's no category on our spreadsheet to write this money down that we're giving to you.
Like, this is not in our budget, man. Like, I can't justify this to my supervisor.
And as mystified as we are by them asking for the bribe, they're mystified by us not paying it.
Well, you guys have tons of money. Yeah, we have, like, from your perspective, infinite money. But we can't just give it to you. And that's part of the reason we have infinite money.
Because you said you want it.
Yeah, exactly. I experienced this in Afghanistan when I was deployed there. And I was at a tiny little army base. And then one of the things they're trying to do is outreach to the local community, okay? And so I've probably told this story before, but they hired a bunch of locals to do cleanup work around the base, like haul trash around, clean facilities, that kind of janitorial work. And so basically the CE guys, or the civil engineers, the guys that run like the base running, just set up a folding table outside the gate one day and said, hey, if you want a job for $5 a week, come talk to us and we'll get you cleared. And then a bunch of people lined up in front of this table to start talking to the Air Force guys. And then during this process of signing people up for this job, this old dude from the village walks to the front of the line, stands next to the table, turns around and says, if you want to work for the Americans, you have to talk to me. And then the entire line took one step to the left and they started talking to him first. And we're all like, you don't have to talk to him. We don't know who this person is. You can just talk to us. But it didn't matter. The way that society worked is that guy was now in charge of the program. That guy now collected a third of everything that we paid everybody that went through it, and he didn't do anything.
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make with all of that is now the world is finding out what this is like. The stories are coming out on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook and on the news.
There are some countries that are hearing this and seeing the outrage and being like, that's just how things work. And then there's all the rest of us first world, like, I don't know, cultured, pampered, like blind to the real world type people like us. They're like, oh, this is an atrocity and it cannot stand, but we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, I don't even know how to pay a bribe if I wanted to. Like the last time I was in Qatar in 2016, I had to travel in and out of Qatar probably about a half dozen times during the time that I was there. And every time there was a different problem with my paperwork, my passport, my visa, my military identification. I'm not saying there was a problem. I'm saying they found a problem.
Right. And because they were expecting you to be like, oh, that's my bad. How much would it cost for me to say get the correct permit that I would need to get past this checkpoint? Yeah, that's what they're waiting for.
Yeah, and I don't know how to say that, of course, or don't want to. And it was terrifying. Like, dude, I'm stranded in this airport, being held hostage by foreign nationals with weapons and ultimate authority over. I'm imagining like Tom Hanks in the terminal, and I'm like, I just hope I can get out of here.
When I was a kid, we were driving down to Rocky Point in Mexico, okay? And we're on this 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere on the way to the coast, and there was these armed dudes in the back of a pickup truck that were stopping traffic in the middle of nowhere. Oh my gosh,
Josh, that is one of my worst nightmares.
Well, and they stopped us, and like the translator, to the best of his ability, was like, these are part of the Mexican Navy, and they're asking for donations for their cause. But it's like 6 dudes with AK-47s. That's not asking for donations. That's a checkpoint.
Yeah. Again, characteristic of third world nations. Mexico and Qatar, we see you.
Yeah. Well, again, we see you, but we're not going to do anything about it.
All right, Josh, smooth transitions aside, I want to change topics entirely to something I've never talked to you about before.
Okay.
So when we were kids and you were going to do something that required social cooperation, there was usually some kind of vehicle. It's usually some social busybody that would like organize the potluck, help get people to bring meals over to the lady that just had a baby, set up the bake sale and figure out who was going to staff the booth. And it was always just a person with a clipboard and a piece of paper.
I always remember my parents being on the phone talking to other people like an inexcusable amount. Like there was just so much coordination that had to happen. It was disgusting.
So the internet has displaced all of that. I don't know what those people even do with their lives anymore.
They're the ones that run these pages and they're the ones that set up the program that spams my phone 3 times a week with the PTA nonsense. Listen, PTA, I didn't sign up to be part of the PTA. Stop texting me.
But which do you prefer? Would you rather get the spam texts or be on the phone all night?
Well, they would only call me once, Ben. They would never call me again.
You'd be like on Muppet Christmas Story when they ask Scrooge for a Christmas donation.
Yes, and it's just a long explanation of intimidation as to why that's not going to happen.
Good day, sir. Okay, so have you used any of these? Let's drop a few names.
I'm absolutely sure that I have. So as part of... here's a great example. There was a big opening day ceremony for my son's flag football league, and it was going to be a potluck. A potluck distributed amongst hundreds of children's parents.
Okay, so that promises to either, through sheer numbers and the bell curve work itself out, or everyone brings rolls and soda and you have a potluck that's all rolls and soda.
So they broke it up into categories. Like, these teams are going to bring this like category of stuff. These people are going to bring main dishes. These people are going to bring sides. These people are going to bring drinks. And then it got farmed out, like, just lower and lower tier from there on out. And so by the time it got to us, when we got the email with go to this page and sign up for something, they had it broken down for the only options we had was potato salad, drinks, and paper plates.
Okay, but when it finally got to you, was it just like a Google Doc or an Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, it was some kind of sign up like group source program that I'd never seen before that was specifically built for like deconflicting potlucks.
Yes. So there's one I want to talk about. It's called Sign Up Genius.
Okay.
And basically that's what it does. Somebody's like, well, this could be a thing and we could put some ads on there and make some money and people will still get what they need. And they're like, okay, do that. So basically you just set up an account with this place, then you get your identity associated with an event, and then it deconflicts what you've signed up to do and reminds you to do it. I don't know if this actually improves the overall experience, but it seems like it should.
Have you not used it enough to determine? Like that's just...
So any event I've used it for, it does the trick.
Well, that's the thing. Let's remove all of the after-the-fact sign-up nonsense and assume as a responsible adult you remember what your commitments are and you actually follow through on it. Just the fact that this application allows you to deconflict. You can see what other people have signed up to bring and what still needs to be brought without having to have an extensive conversation with all of those people in the room. That's a win.
Yeah, and it kind of removes the need for, like you said with the football team thing, was hierarchical delegation that also could potentially concentrate too much in one area. Like, you can set up templates for an event that scale based on the number of people attending the event and, say, oh, you're going to need more, I don't know, paper plates and napkins or whatever. Bring this many.
Does the program do that? Does the program figure like, hey, listen, I know you put one person to bring paper plates, so that person's bringing 700 paper plates.
But that's the thing about something like this. Once it becomes a digital application, there's always room for user feedback and improvements. If you go in as the event organizer, you can say, here's the event, here's the populace, here's how I'm going to communicate with them. It'll give you suggestions. You could give parameters. Like you said, then you have visibility of who's signed up for what. You can identify problems in advance. It's perfect.
Did I ever tell you about the book I read about the people that were trying to create a potluck sign-up program? It was this radical idea back at the dawn of the internet. They were creating this application for people to sign up for potlucks, and they were doing exactly what we're talking about. They started iterating on the idea and like, oh, well, we can add this feature. Oh, and we can add this metadata. Oh, and since we have this, we can also add this. And then 2 years later, they were Google.
What?
No, I'm totally making that up. It's a joke.
But I'm just dang, hook, line, and sinker.
Well, what you're talking about iterating on an idea like this, like, oh, we can collect and deconflict information. You're only 4 steps from being Google at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd seen this also in other contexts, so let's put aside potlucks, and there's other things besides potlucks you can use Sign Up Genius for, but there's other ones that are kind of for like social giving. Deconflicting social giving. So have you ever seen a GoFundMe?
Yes, I think everybody has seen GoFundMe.
Okay, so GoFundMe, I don't know what to compare it to. It doesn't have an easy analog of the past. It was like, hey, Bob's house burned down over the weekend. Everybody throw $20 in this hat and we'll give it to him and he can buy some new pants.
GoFundMe is just a general crowdsourcing vehicle. So it doesn't matter if it's like what you're talking about. Like a third party will set up on behalf. Like, oh, hey, this bad thing happened to somebody. We're trying to collect money. Here is an easy place, a trusted third party where you can go and give money and you can kind of be more assured that it's actually going to get to Bob. At the other end of the spectrum, it's like, hey, I work a 12-hour shift job that I hate, and I've always wanted to be a fashion designer, and I'm making my new line of pants, and I need $5,000 to get it off the ground. Who wants to help me?
Okay, that's more like Kickstarter. I've also seen ones that are just like, I'm having a real hard time right now. Can anyone give me some money?
The joke that I've heard about GoFundMe is that it's 10,000 poor people sharing the same $100 around.
Well, there's another idea about it too, and that's that if 40 years ago you were passing a hat around for the poor family that needs some help at Christmas time. What if the guy who was passing the hat around said, all right, I'm going to pass my hat around, and then once I get it back, I'm going to count all the money, and I'm going to skim 5% off the top, and then I'll give it to him.
You see, yeah, well, hang on. That would be a social faux pas. But at the same time, like, there is unspoken social pressure that's happening with the hat passing that doesn't happen with the GoFundMe. For example, if that hat gets passed to me and I look at it and immediately pass it to the person on my right, I'm going to get dirty looks from both of those people being like, you didn't put anything in the hat, and I know you didn't put anything in the hat. I know you didn't have to, but I did, and you didn't.
Well, one interesting thing I've noticed about those is there's two aspects to that. One is converting someone who sees it into a giver, and the other is getting more people to see it. So the most successful GoFundMes are the ones that do both, that you contribute to and that you share with other people. And I think it is the modern day equivalent of someone seeing you passing the hat. You can have it show your name as someone who gave. You can have it post to your social media feed and say, I gave to this, you can too.
That's just virtue signaling.
But it is. Yes, it is. So... But isn't that the same as putting money in the collection plate and then passing it to the next guy?
No, that's like putting money in the collection plate, standing up and saying, I put $5 in the collection plate instead of $4 this week, and then passing it to the next person.
So let me ask you then, assuming that I have or do give to these kinds of things from time to time, what would you guess that I do?
I would hope that you just silently give what you want to give, and then if you personally firmly believed in the thing that you were giving to, that you would share it with a select few without saying how much you gave.
Yes, and I'll add that I also checked the little box that says make my contribution anonymous.
Oh, that's good. You took it a step further and made sure that the person receiving it didn't know who it was coming from.
Yes. Okay, so there was a new one I saw this week that I'd never seen before. I didn't realize there was more space for, startup internet companies to expand into, and this one was called Meal Train. Have you ever heard of Meal Train?
No, that's a new one to me.
Okay, so Meal Train, I guess, is a way to internetize the idea of somebody needs someone to bring them food at their house.
That's Uber Eats. That's DoorDash. Like, there are companies that do this.
Okay, here's the thing. I'd never seen this before. But back in the day, back in church when, our moms used to get on the phone all night and talk to people about who's bringing what to the potluck, then there would also be, and so-and-so just had a baby and she's got 3 little kids and they need someone to bring them over dinner every night for the next week.
Okay.
So I'll take Monday, Betty's got Tuesday, Jane's got Thursday, and so on. And then it was done. And you just knew you were responsible for that night. Then there wasn't a lot of parameters about it. But this allows them to identify allergies, give preferences.
Oh, how dare you.
And you can either sign up for a night and block it off and just say, I will bring that person food. Or there's a sponsored link to Uber Eats. And you can give them a gift certificate. And then it's basically just commoditizing it. And it's like giving them money to buy food.
I don't like some of these, like, we're really playing with the boundaries of what's giving and what's just like grifting.
I know. And I won't give the scenario, but this one came to me out of context at work. It was related to a military family and their needs and something. And it was enough. There were enough things on the one side of the scale that it really made me consider the appropriateness of it.
Okay. You don't want to give any more details of
that? Just rank and position and need and stuff. And I thought, did they really need me to buy them an Uber Eats gift certificate?
Yeah, you see, like, I can imagine getting this email like, oh, Betty Sue just had a baby and they need somebody to bring them dinner. I'm like, oh, let me send them $15 in Uber Eats. And then I get to the part where it goes, oh, and they prefer only the Panera Bread macaroni and cheese and not necessarily the Kraft macaroni and cheese. I'd immediately delete that email and mark it as spam. Because, like, the second that, like, you're asking me for a charitable thing, but you need to make sure that it meets at least this level because anything below that is poor people food. Oh, okay, no, you're way too entitled to be asking me for anything.
So what about what is the difference in bringing them a home cooked meal versus giving them a gift certificate? What about that additional layer of abstraction makes it taste different?
Well, this is
to the giver.
This is the same phenomenon they talked about in the original Freakonomics book, where they asked people to do a mundane task, and it didn't matter what the task was. But when they asked them to do it as a favor, the people were far more productive than the people that, hey, can you do this? We'll give you $5. Those people performed way lower than the people that were doing it as a favor. And so there is this weird thing that happens when you introduce clear, known monetary values into the equation that changes it from charity or I'm doing something good for somebody to a business transaction.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's exactly it. Well done. Okay, so that's Sign Up Genius, Meal Train, and GoFundMe. I don't know. They have their uses and their purposes. I'd never seen Meal Train before. It gave me mixed emotions.
It's amazing that there are still niches of the internet that haven't been monetized yet, and we're still finding out about them.
Okay, Josh, I got a military question for you.
Okay.
You and Nicole both went through what they call the Transition Assistance Program. Did you not?
So, funny story about the Transition Assistance Program, Ben. The one that I had to go through was like a 3-day seminar. It was supposed to be all day, all 3 of those days.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of the first day, I went to the guy. I was like, hey, listen, none of this applies to me. I know how to write a resume. I have my degree. I've got stuff lined up when I'm done with this. Can you please just sign this off so I don't have to waste my time here for the next 2 days? And the guy looked me in the eye and he goes, sure, no problem. And then he signed my paper and I didn't go back.
Okay, well, let's talk about why. First of all, here's what I think is why. And you and I have talked about this before, about how the military represents a slice of our national sovereignty. 1% of the people of our population at some point in their life raise their right arm to the square and swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, up to and including giving of their own life. Of those people that do that, most are not required to give the last full measure of devotion. At some point, then they have to transition back to civilian life. Some of those people that undertook that task to defend their country were doing something so unique and maybe the only employment they'd ever held, that then when they go out onto the street to find work, it doesn't go smoothly. And it looks badly on the nation to require so much of someone and then dump them out on the street and leave them on their own.
This entire program, the reason that it exists was summed up for me when the guy was explaining at the beginning that there are a disproportionate amount of homeless veterans in the world. If you look at the population, you're talking about 1 in 100 people sign up for military service. More than 1 in 100 homeless people served in the military and were veterans. And so that's the idea, is that the reason this program exists is they're trying to make it hey, we realize that we put you in a really weird box, probably ever since you got out of high school, and we're going to try to make it so you fit into a different box instead of just falling off the planet and becoming homeless.
Yeah, and that looks bad on the country. If we require so much for someone and then be like, well, good luck, finding a job in the private sector now that you've spent 5 years being an infantry soldier.
Or 5 years working on F-18 jet engines. It's
right, or 5 years being a navigator in the backseat of a B-52.
Yeah, those are some translatable skills.
So, yeah, government recognized hey, we need to have a formal program, and along with any formal government program comes bureaucracy, which means now we need to identify every single person that's leaving and require that they come to this 3-day seminar before they leave the service.
They did it in the most bureaucratic, nonsensical military way possible. We don't identify the people that might have a difficult time transitioning. We just say, no, you know what? Screw it. If you're getting out, you're all getting the same briefing. You officers that have formal education, contacts on the outside, and probably jobs lined up are going to the same resume writing class that freaking 19-year-old senior airman who doesn't know his head from a hole in the ground is going to.
Okay, that is all true. And in their defense, they don't have the time or the resources to create a custom class for both of those kinds of people. They just got to combine them all together. So in the room, and I felt this tension, there were 30-year people who were retiring and 3-year people who had done 1 term of service and were departing with their GI Bill scholarship to go get an education. And those people all got the same workshop.
Yep. Ants with sledgehammers.
But One thing they don't tell you, what you might not have known, is that you can take this class voluntarily up to 3 times before you retire.
What, seriously?
Yeah.
You could just keep going? Like, why would I sign up for this 3-day monotonous seminar more than once?
Well, you're required to take it once, but you can take it more than once. So I signed up and took it 2 years in advance of my retirement date.
Okay.
And here's what it gave me, because it wasn't just that. It gave me, they make you wear civilian clothes instead of your military uniform and show up to this, classroom full of other people in various stages of transition out of the military into civilian life. And you bring your computer and they show you all the websites and introduce you to the people that you need to, understand all of the Veterans Administration benefits that are available to you, the retirement program, getting access to your scholarships, death benefits, health insurance. It's not just about resume writing. That's one part of it. And translating what you do into a marketable skill on the outside in a way that will be translatable to a civilian that doesn't understand what you know and how you know it. So I did it. I signed up for this. I took this 3-day class. It is a little bit of ants with sledgehammers, but I don't feel, maybe your person was different in New Mexico or wherever you took it, but they weren't wasting my time. It was pretty good. And there was a lot of information. Like, I walked away with 400 pages worth of manuals that they went through enough that I felt confident I could go back and find what I needed in those books.
Gosh, 400 pages. Like, that should tell you something right there.
Yeah.
Like, getting out of the military and becoming a civilian requires a 400-page manual at minimum.
Yeah, and it isn't 400 in a single manual. It's 408 manuals. Split across 8 manuals. It's complicated. So, and there's one I want to talk about, Josh, that I don't know how much you know about this, but it's government disability.
Yes. So, based on your military service, if you're talking about physical or mental
physical or mental disability resulting from your military service.
Right, because when you first came into the military, you had a complete, thorough physical conducted on your person. And when you leave the military, they conduct another thorough physical on your person, and they will assign you a percentage of disability based on any ongoing, lingering physical ailments that you have.
And basically, based on their calculations, if it's above 50%, they will pay you money each month that's tax-free to compensate you for that level of disability that you ostensibly incurred due to your military service.
I am 10% disabled because of my hearing loss.
Oh. What does that get you?
Nothing, because I didn't sign up for it, because I don't feel like I'm entitled to it.
Huh. So my wife and I had a conversation about that, about feelings of entitlement. So let me try to ask this in a utilitarian way instead of a deontological way. If you felt like you needed those resources that you could potentially get by putting a claim in with the Veterans Administration for 10% disability, would you be more likely to try if you needed it more?
If I needed it more, I probably would, yes. Part of it is, for me specifically, I can't help but approach it as a zero-sum game. So in my mind, I feel like any money that I take for myself is going to take away from somebody else, which is absolutely not true. This is the government we're talking about. They're just going to write the check. But I don't feel like I've given enough to the military to warrant a check forever. And I don't even know if my 10% hearing loss even qualifies for any amount of disability payment anyway.
That was really interesting because you kind of touch on 3 different moral areas all in about the space of 10 seconds. So, yeah, one is do I feel entitled or not to claim this? Do I feel like really the injury that I incurred is because of my military service? The other is, and I think you're right that it is a zero-sum game, that there are only limited resources, and you can't just spread it indefinitely. It has to come from somewhere, and maybe if you compete better or can navigate the bureaucracy better, you could potentially take it away from someone who needs it more than you do.
Nah, we're talking about non-discretionary funding. They have no choice but to write those disability bills. There is not a senator or congressman in this country that would say, we can't give veterans their disability checks.
It's complicated, Josh, because that's why there's so many weird rules and math about the whole thing. basically the more layers of bureaucracy they add on to validating your level of disability, the harder it becomes for anyone to get it.
Yeah, that's true. They create more barriers to entry in the hopes of reducing the overall bill.
It does. It must.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got limited resources and perverse incentives. Like, you remember the 2016 VA hospital scandal in Arizona?
Yes, where the wait times and just the level of service was so incredibly bad that it triggered like a bunch of government audits.
Yeah, well, okay, so I read into that, and there was more to it. One of the things was that the VA had heard about them having problems with not seeing people in need fast enough. So what they did is they set up an incentive program that would pay doctors bonuses based on seeing patients on time. So what they did is they just put a cliff on their sign-up roster so that it looked on paper like they were seeing everyone within 11 days of their request and collecting all of their bonuses. And then they had a secret sign-up roster that was everyone else, and that extended into the hundreds of days. And I think 40 people died on the waiting roster at that one VA hospital alone in Arizona.
Ugh. That's the kind of crap where... all right, so as an accountant, like, they teach us about segregation of duties to prevent that kind of corruption from creeping into the system.
It was a perverse incentive.
Well, not only that, but the system that's governing that, the checks and things, should have been set up in a way that it was impossible for that kind of double roster to be created in the first place.
Yeah.
There was also on the lighter note, as a part of that investigation, they also found that there were so many paper records, because the VA is a government institution, and government, we love our paper records. There were so many paper records being stored on one floor of this building, they found that the weight of the paper was actually exceeding the engineered limits of the structure.
And so, no one accounts for that in a bureaucracy. I love it, though. What a beautiful allegory of bureaucracy.
There was so much paper on this floor of the building that it was causing structural damage to the building.
Wow. That's beautiful. I want a poster of that on my wall. All right, Josh, last time on the Bad at Magic podcast, you had introduced me to an idea called the 5-foot shelf.
Yes, we discovered that it is indeed a 5-foot shelf. I couldn't remember if it was 4 or 6. Turns out I was right in the middle.
Yeah, it's a 5-foot shelf. So this thing dates back to the year 1909. The president of Harvard, Dr. Charles W. Eliot, first published this in 1909. It became formalized in 1919. The Harvard Universal Classics, originally known as Dr. Eliot's 5-Foot Shelf, is a 51-volume anthology of classic works from world literature, compiled and edited by Harvard University president Charles W. Eliot, first published in 1909.
So if I recall correctly, the reason for this thing being created was the guy said, for like people that are out in the boonies, out in the rural America, people that don't have access to like formal education, like they need something. Okay, and he's like, these are the books. Like, if you don't have access to a school, read these books, and this will give you kind of a well-rounded understanding of the world.
Yes, or the things that led to the current thinking on what the world is like.
Which, I mean, that's cool. That's like, here, sum up all of human knowledge in 51 books. Ready, go.
Yeah, so, it has things like The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, or The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, or The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. These are some of the classics on the list.
It's got Aesop's Fables and Grimm's Fairy Tales. I mean, like, you can't think of something that isn't in there somewhere.
Yeah, but that's what it was in 1909. And, at the rate of printing books, this wasn't intended to change very often or very frequently. In fact, it became a frequent catalog offering. I'll put an image in the photo album that I published with the episode of this magazine-sized page ad for this thing. Like, if you want your house to look like a well-read house, then just pay us, $5 a month for the next 5 years, and we'll send you these things today, and you'll have your library sitting on your shelf, and you will look like a well-read human being. I wonder how many people actually read these after they bought them, or if it just looked nice on the shelf.
That just reminded me of in the dark ages when I was in elementary school and there was no internet. The grocery store that my mom went to did a thing where they would come out with one volume of an encyclopedia every month and just have it like on a pallet at the front of the store. And so every month for like almost 2 years, she bought one volume of that year's encyclopedia until we had a complete printed version of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
That's brilliant.
Genius.
I don't know about you, but my family had the World Book, and I read that thing like crazy. I loved it.
I remember our family buying one on CD-ROM, and that was like a huge deal. It's like one of those super thick CD-ROM cases that had like 8 different discs in it or some nonsense. And it was the world's worst web browser. And it was basically a really terrible version of Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's the thing. Wikipedia is fantastic. Anyway, you and I went through this list, which has grown to 158 titles now, and checked off how many that we have read of the list of Harvard classics. Because last time you predicted 0, and I'd like our audience to know you were wrong about that. You have not read 0 of them. How many have you read, Josh?
I have read 3 of the 158 volumes.
1.5% of the Harvard Library you've read. I've read an additional 6 books more than you, and that's mostly because they're in the Bible.
Now, here's something we didn't say, though, because how many of these books, like when you read the title, were you, 1, aware of that book's existence, and 2, could sum up what it was about without having ever read it?
That's a really interesting question. I'd say probably half.
That's more than me. I would probably say a third. But like a lot of them are like essays. It's like, oh, well, this compilation of essays from, Benjamin
Emerson.
Franklin. Yeah, it's like I know who this person is, but I didn't know they wrote so many. They were such a prolific essay writer.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the one, there's a modern fiction volumes in there. There's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I mean, I don't think I've ever actually read it, but I feel like I know pretty much what's going on there.
Man, my wife loves Pride and Prejudice, and she often threatens me with watching the BBC 9-hour version of it on TV or something.
Bonnet movie. Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving. These are the books that are in the collection.
Don Quixote by somebody. I know the book. I don't know who wrote it. But yeah, I mean, these are quote unquote modern classics, but like you're talking about, there's just a well-rounded education on one 5-foot shelf.
Yeah. But they haven't changed much. So there's other similar compendia that exist where they've tried to come up with lists. There's Columbia University's The Great Books of the Western World, or Palgrave's Golden Treasury. It almost seems like a fool's errand anymore to try to compile a list of books that constitute some kind of executive summary of the world's knowledge.
Well, and this is kind of a discussion I remember having with somebody in a flying squadron, because when you're in a flying squadron and there's bad weather, you have a lot of time on your hands for random conversations. And one of the things the guy was talking about is I think we are dumber today than we have ever been. And I was like, defend your position. And he said, a farmer back in the Middle Ages knew everything there was to know about growing a crop. And he was so well-rounded, he could mend his tools and create things on the fly and do all of these things. And my counter argument was, yes, he had a very broad understanding of things, but we have much more in-depth knowledge of specific topics. And so it's my whole discussion with him was a breadth versus depth argument. Maybe somebody in the Middle Ages had more breadth of understanding, but we have much more depth of understanding.
I would say probably neither. I found a quote while I was reading about this and just trying to sum up my ideas about the whole thing was Isaac Newton, when interviewed and asked about how he was able to accomplish such amazing things, writing Principia Mathematica and, coming up with theories about gravity and all those kinds of things.
The dude invented calculus. So yeah.
And they said this to him, the opposite of what your friend said. You know more than anyone has ever known about these things. How is that possible? And he said, summarizing something that had probably been said for hundreds of years and he probably read in a book, if I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And
that's what I'm saying. Instead of depth, you're just talking about altitude. He had more depth of understanding in his field.
Kinda. You and I have talked on this podcast before about this essay that was written by an economist named Leonard Reed. It's called I, Pencil. And it's written from the first person, from the perspective of a pencil. I was interested enough in it that I actually went out and read it. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's really interesting. Basically, it's a pencil talking about how he came into existence, and basically how something as simple as a little piece of graphite inside of a piece of wood wrapped in a piece of metal with a little piece of rubber at the end is so complicated in how it came into existence that no one knows how to do it.
Well, and that's... This is the whole point of civilization, right? Is to allow more specialization like this. As our civilization advances, inherently, you have to become more and more specialized as an individual.
Yeah. So that's my summary of this. I think nowadays, if there were something that's the equivalent of the Harvard shelf for someone in the year 2022, I don't think it's a list of books.
No, it can't be. Like, what would constitute a well-rounded education in 2022?
Yeah, it's something else. I don't know what it is. Listeners, what do you think?
I think it's a high school diploma. I think it's a GED. I think that's the foundation of where you need to start. Like, it just gives you a sprinkle of all of the subjects that matter, and then you pick the one that you want to specialize in, and then go further training, further experience, further education in that.
Yeah. Well, this, I think, initially, since it was published by the president of Harvard University, the intent was to be the next level above that. And I don't necessarily know what that is now, but it isn't 5 feet worth of books.
Well, you want to talk about specialization of education, Ben. Boy, howdy, do I have a Josh versus bureaucracy for you.
All right, let's hear it. What happened?
Man, I'm on top of the transitions now. Haha, this is transition episode. Okay. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but I have been working essentially nonstop for the last 4-ish years trying to get my CPA, okay, my Certified Public Accountant certification in the state of Arizona.
Yeah, I thought we established like 2 episodes ago. You're all done with that. Nothing left to do. It's easy.
Okay.
Complete.
Job's
done.
That's what I thought too. That's what I thought. And so I paid my $100. I filled out this application, which was by itself a headache because not only did I have to answer all of the questions that you would expect to ask, not only did I have to send certified transcripts from all of my educational institutions.
This is by design. It's to keep out the filthy casuals.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a barrier to entry. But I had to have my boss, my current supervisor, fill out a 3-page essay question application and
proving that you met the prerequisite level of practice.
You have to have, in the state of Arizona, you have to have an experience component along with the education. You have to have worked as an accountant for basically 1 full calendar year under the auspices of another accountant. And if your boss is a CPA, it's easy. It's a one-liner. It's like, I worked under this person. Here's their license number. My boss is not a CPA. My boss is an enrolled agent, a tax expert. And so she had to fill out an application and provide a resume for herself to demonstrate, yes, this is a person that does accounting, is an accountant, has the requisite experience, but is not a CPA. And then we had to have that notarized. Like, her signature on that form had to be notarized just as a part, as one attachment to my overall application to the board, okay? So
yeah. Okay, can we pause on that for a sec? Because I'm interested in that.
Okay.
There's certain things where you're asking other people to do for you, like, would you write me a letter of professional reference or something like that, where it's kind of reaching the boundary of how much it's polite to ask someone else to do for you.
Yeah.
It sounds like this is pretty high into that space.
And I was aware of this, and so I did 2 things. I first of all, one, I said, hey, boss lady, I need these things from you, and in order to alleviate as much as possible from your plate, I am going to fill out the essay portion of the application for you. Like what is common in the military of writing your own performance evaluation. That's basically what I did. They asked questions like, does this person perform accounting duties? And if so, explain them. And I wrote an essay about what I do day to day. And I did that for all 3 pages for her because I'm like, I'm going to write all of this because I also need you to do an up-to-date resume on yourself for my application. And yeah, so I did feel bad. That's a big ask, and I knew it was a big ask. But at the same time, there is this other fiscal incentive that is in the background because my boss is not a CPA. But if I become a CPA, she can say she's a CPA firm. Like there's things in services and charges that she can charge now to her clients and generate revenue for herself because I'm getting more experience and more certifications. So while, yes, it's a big ask, that was kind of offset a little bit, at least, by the fact that she wants me to be a CPA so she can start bringing in more money.
Okay, so you had to do all this to establish her credentials so that she could vouch for your practice that you met the Arizona requirements. You did all
experience. Yes, did all that. All right, so here's the thing. Here's what happened, Ben. So I fill out my application, and I got that thing from my boss. I got it. I paid for the notary to come to our office and stamp the thing, and the notary the notary almost forgot to stamp it. She's like, okay, I think we're all done here. I'm like, did you stamp it? And she's like, oh, silly me. And I'm like, that's the one thing I asked you to come here for, but no, I didn't actually say all that. I was very polite.
Josh, that is a great example of when you should have shouted the thing. You know the thing. You had one job.
You have one job is to stamp this paper. All right, so anyway, I sent all this in with my application online. And silly me, Ben, it said on there, if you did your initial application to do your CPA exams, because I also had to apply to this same board to say, yea, verily, you can go take the tests. They said, if you have done that within the last 5 years, we have your transcripts on file. You don't have to send in your transcripts. I said, great. I don't have to send in my transcripts. That's outstanding. Well, I sent all that in, and then like a couple of weeks go by.
Wait, so you assumed when you sent in your transcripts to validate beginning the exams that the same level of screening had been applied then that would be applied now?
No. So the state of Arizona has an education requirement that I believe that I had met. And I was required when there's two separate applications. At the beginning, 2 years ago, when I wanted to start.
But 2 years ago, you assumed you'd already been pre-screened, and that what was being checked for now was the same thing, and it would just be a rubber stamp.
Yeah. Well, and it said explicitly in the application, if you have applied for the CPA exam within the last 5 years, we still have your transcripts on file. You do not have to send new ones.
Okay.
I was like, okay, great. So I sent in my application and washed my hands of it. Well, for some reason, I don't know why. Like you mentioned this when you're talking about insurance companies. Mail is, for some stupid reason, the most official form of communication.
Yes.
And so a couple weeks later, I get this letter in the mail, and it said like, oh.
They don't call you. They don't email you.
Yeah,
they
don't text
you
me.
A certified letter.
They sent me a letter. And in this letter, it says, there was a problem with your application. It is summarized below. So, like, obviously the top half of this
that was
like
a form letter.
Yeah, it's a form letter. But then the bottom half shows, like, this table. And it was just so perfect because it says, like, Arizona State Board requirements. And then the next row is yours. Like your application.
Your credentials.
Yes. And it said accounting credits, and, like, required by Arizona, 33. Yours, 0. Total semester hours, 120. Yours, 0. And I was like, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, oh, clearly they don't have my transcripts. And so it said at the bottom of the letter, if you have problems or questions, either email or call me at this information. And it gave me a person's name, and which I thought was great. It's like, oh, there must be so few applicants that there is a person that's in charge of this. And so I called this person. I'm like, hey, I got this letter. It seems like you guys don't have my transcripts. And she's like, and she was so incredibly helpful. This person, I will not name her, but you know who you are at the State Board of Accountancy in Arizona. Thank you so much for all of your help. She's always super polite every time I talk to her.
Wow, Josh, that was uncharacteristically complimentary. Well done.
Wait, that should tell you how nice this person was to me in a very annoying process.
Yeah.
So, like, I called her and she said, like, oh, yeah, it looks like we just don't have your transcripts. I'm like, okay, what's the best way I can get those to you? And then instead of doing this back and forth nonsense, she told me flat out, okay, send the transcripts to this address, like, attention, this person at this mail drop.
This is Mr. Incredible leaning across the desk to the little old lady.
Yeah.
Go down to Janice in accounting and fill out a form 127B.
Exactly. And so that is exactly what I did. Like that day, I went to both my financial or my education institutions, and I applied to have my transcripts officially sent to this person. I will say this is the one nice thing that the Air Force Academy has ever done for me is you can have official transcripts sent anywhere in the world for any reason for free. They don't care.
Okay.
That's good. University
Yeah.
of Phoenix charged me $20.
I definitely have to send my university more money if I want transcripts released.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's a charge for that. Anywho, so then I had those sent to her, and I got confirmations from both. Like, oh, this was like Air Force Academy was happy to email it, which she said she's happy to accept if it's directly from them. But of course, the University of Phoenix only does the mail, so they sent a certified letter. Fine, whatever, I'll wait. So they sent it. I waited a full week, and then I called her on Monday. I was like, hey, person X, just wanted to follow up. I sent in my transcripts. I just wanted to make sure that you got them. And she's like, yes, they're on my desk. You are good to go. No problems. We're going to get you in front of the board to review your packet and get you approved or denied for the next month. The board has to approve every applicant, and they only go before the board once a month.
Great. Did you ever figure out how they lost your transcripts in the first place?
I did not ask, Ben.
Right,
like that.
Whatever.
I'm trying to let those things go for my own sanity.
Okay. I'm sorry.
As a younger man, I would have like drawn my flaming sword, like, "How dare you lose my transcripts?" But no, I'm not doing that because it's not worth my blood pressure.
Right. You just got to fix it now.
Exactly.
I like this. You're describing one of my overriding characteristics, and that is we don't need to play the blame game. We just need to fix it.
Yeah. Like we can dwell on the problem or we can figure out the solution. Here's the thing. And I this person, again, like just 2 thumbs up, 5 stars, would talk to again. The next day, Tuesday, she calls me and she says, so, hey, remember when I told you that you were good to go? I was like, yes. And she goes, that was a lie. You are not good to go. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, you do not meet the education requirement to be a CPA in Arizona. I was like,
it was 33 hours of experience and 120 hours of.
This is what I was like. I have a master's degree in accounting. How is that possible? She goes, you don't have enough accounting credits. Long pause on the phone.
My master's, how many accounting credits you have?
My master's degree in accounting doesn't have enough accounting to count for accounting. And she goes, yes. Typically, applicants we get in Arizona also have an undergrad in accounting, which makes up the difference. And I was like, how many credits do I need? You need 33 credit hours in accounting. How many did my master's degree have? It had 30. Ben, yes, that was my reaction. Was just stunned laughter of, you're telling me I am one class short of getting certified, even though I've been an accountant for 4 years. I've passed all of the CPA exams, and I have a master's in accounting. And here's the thing. This is the other thing that blew my mind. Their requirement for overall education was 120 credit hours. Ben, I have 190 credit hours. I have so much more education than is required.
But not the right kind.
But not the right flavor.
And they care about that.
And I was like, well, what about this class on my undergrad transcript? That's operations management. That was like half of that class was budgeting.
What about the essay question? And certainly there's some more points there.
And she goes, that class starts with OPP. It doesn't start with ACC. If the class number doesn't start with ACC, we don't care. And I was like, oh, and like it took me a minute of like, I had to collect myself. And I'm like, okay.
This is stressing me out. I hate taking on bureaucracy.
Well, this is the thing. So I was like, okay, so I have to take one more class. She goes, yes. And I go, okay. And they can't be duplicative, so I can't retake a class. She goes, no. I'm like, okay. What classes will you accept that I don't already have that will make these 3 hours? And to her credit, she had that answer in like 30 seconds. She's like, okay, I'm looking at your transcript. And I'm looking at the list of classes we accept specifically from University of Phoenix. Here are the ones that you don't have. And
wow.
She rattled off a list of all the numbers. 465, 423, like 527, like just all of those numbers, right?
Okay.
And
so you were just in fix-it mode now. So did you find one that you want?
So I went to the after I got off the phone with her, I went to the University of Phoenix website and I found they had 2 classes that I didn't have that were being offered starting like in 4 days from when I was looking at it. And so I call them and I'm like, hey, I need to get into one of these classes. Are they still open for registration? Like, yes, they are open for today and tomorrow. I'm like, absolutely perfect.
Wait. Is there some kind of deadline you're working to? Like, if you don't finish this class before the end of the year, everything expires and you have to start over.
No. So luckily, I did look this up because I was worried about that. But once there is a time limit, once you take the first CPA exam and pass it, you have 18 months to pass the other 3. But once you pass all 4, that counts forever. Like, yea, verily, like I have a rubber stamp on my forehead. I could tattoo this on my back. Like, I passed the CPA exams on this date, and it never expires.
Okay. So as long as you take all 4 of them from start to finish within a certain amount of time, then you're done.
It locks in. Now, okay. I have that box checked in perpetuity forever. I have passed the CPA exams.
As long as they don't lose it somehow.
Ben, I will murder you, like reaching through this microphone. Okay, so I'm calling I'm on the phone with the people. Like, you have today and tomorrow to sign for this class. I'm like, that is perfect. Like, there's a question about my GI Bill that I will save for the financial aid department, but I am willing to pay out of pocket to get this thing started, and then I'll ask the VA for reimbursement, whatever. I don't care. Let's get this done. They're okay, let's go through the application process. This person's walking me through, knocking it out. I'm going to get signed for this class. It's done. It's like, hang on. There's a prerequisite level class that you have to take for this class.
No.
And I'm like, what's the prerequisite?
You're getting bureaucracy from the University of Arizona to Phoenix now?
Yes. And I'm like, and she goes, okay, you have to have taken Accounting 285, Fundamentals of Accounting.
You need to take Accounting 101, sir.
And I'm on the
master's
phone,
degree in accounting and a full-time accountant and passed all 4 of the CPA exams.
Ben, you can't make this up. I was on the phone with her and I said, I have a master's degree from your institution in accounting, and you're telling me I don't have the prerequisite to take a lower level course. Like, mind you, every accounting class that I've taken was 500 level or higher. I'm trying to sign up for a 400 level class, and they're saying I haven't taken a 200 level class, so I can't take this class. And my head was about to explode. And this person goes, it's no problem. We can send this for an exception to our exceptions department or whatever, and they've got to review it, and they'll get back to you.
Did you get the exception or not?
And this is the thing. I'm like, why? Why is there a separate person that has to look at this simple 2 + 2 = 4 equation and determine that I may just barely have the required foundation in accounting to take this class?
I'll tell you why. You know why. It's because the person you were talking to was the kind of person who signs people up for classes, not the kind of person who can make an objective judgment about your education.
In their defense, they had the perfect comeback, and it's for our accreditation. We can't, we have to hold everybody to the same standard as an educational institution in order to maintain our accreditation.
This bureaucracy answers to a higher bureaucracy that rules, that the one ring that will rule them all.
Right. And so this is the thing. The thing said you have to have this specific class or equivalent in quotes. And I assumed, I was kind of low stress about this when she goes, this process takes about 6 hours. It'll be fine. You'll get an email. The class will be in your shopping cart. Click the link in the email, you pay for it, and you'll be enrolled. No problem. There's beyond that, there's not going to be any delays. And that's the only thing that calmed me down from, I'm not going to miss out on this course, because I want to get this done as soon as humanly possible, Ben. I'm so sick. This is, you know what? This is the part of this whole experience that I haven't talked to you about yet. This is the part that really ate away at my soul.
Other than the fact that this is going to cost you $1,300 or something?
I'll get back to that part too. But I woke up that Tuesday morning, and I was taking a shower. And Ben, I cannot make this up. I remember clearly thinking to myself, you know what? It's been so nice not having to study for my CPA exam every night, not having to do 2 hours of grad school work every night, and just I felt like I had so much extra time to be with my family and to still do the things that I wanted to do. I felt like I was getting my life back. And that, the
universe sensed the opportunity to crash down on your head with a bunch of irony.
And then Hermes on the top of Mount Olympus heard my thoughts, nudged Zeus hey, watch this.
Hit that guy with a lightning bolt.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
So, are you in this class right now?
All right, so everything worked going back to the person at the CPA board. This is what set her apart for me, okay? This is what took her from excellent to outstanding in her field, is because that morning, as I was frantically working through this bureaucratic process to say, yes, my master's degree is enough to take your undergrad accounting class, she sent me an email and said, hey, I'm not sure if this is helpful, but other states have different education requirements that you might meet the requirements for. And we have a process where if you're certified in another state, it's pretty straightforward to take that and just translate it directly into an Arizona certification. So maybe it would be easier for you to actually get certified in a random other state and then just transfer your certification here. And that email, that sets her apart, doesn't it? 24 hours after the fact, this person
she was looking out, she understood that you were not the right candidate to be hampered by all this bureaucracy.
Yeah, and not only that,
you deserved another chance.
I was still on her mind, and she was still trying to help me solve the problem.
Yeah,
and
wow,
that's what's
impressive.
Right? Like, that's what set her out in my mind.
Okay.
Anyway, long story short, yes, I did get the email like at the end of the day saying, yes, you can go ahead and take this class. We'll waive the prerequisite because you have your master's in accounting. I signed up, I paid for the class, and then I started the process that I'm still working with to be like, because I still have something like 40% of my post 9/11 GI Bill available to me.
Okay.
So
you get the government to pay for the $1,300. It's not coming out of your pocket.
Yeah, it came out of my pocket to pay for it, and then I'll get reimbursed on the back end, and that's the bureaucratic process that I'm working through now.
Okay.
But so here, all right, there's two more points that I want to go to, and the first point is the first thing that this class does, like all online classes, like, hey, go to this forum thread and post a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing professionally, why you're taking the class.
Like you're brand new in the accounting program.
Well, they do this for every online class,
yes,
right?
I know. I have a master's from the University of Phoenix.
Well, so there you go. What makes me feel so good is a full 50% of the students in the class that I am taking are people that their paragraph is, I'm a CPA in state X, I am moving to state Y, they require more credit hours, I am taking this class for that reason.
50%?
Yeah. Half of the people in this course are just accountants trying to check a box for an education
bureaucracy gone mad. That's what this is.
Well, I mean, just feel good that your CPAs are being forced to take academic class after academic class just to keep up on things.
My CPAs are good at jumping through bureaucratic hurdles.
Isn't that what you want in an accountant?
So that Tuesday morning when you woke up and you're in the shower saying, oh, what a relief, I'm done with all that, I can move on with my life. And then you found out all this bad news and you were sitting there outraged. You wanted someone who understood, who knew problems with taking on bureaucracy.
You're just reading my notes now.
Who was the first person that came to mind that you wanted to talk to?
And here we transition to bad at husbanding. Okay, so listeners, imagine my chagrin when I'm in this 2-hour span. I go from I'm going to get my CPA certification next month, which probably is going to come with a pay raise, which like reduces the amount of overhead like that I have to deal with every day, to I'm right back in the middle of having to go through stupid online courses.
Welcome back to your freshman year of accounting.
Oh, so in the middle of the holidays, no less. Like so pissed, so mad. I was in a tizzy, Ben. I was worked up.
I was so mad you called someone.
I was so bad I picked up my telephone and voice called like a barbarian somebody to talk to about it. And that person was Ben.
So I was in the middle of my transition assistance program class, and I saw that you were calling me, and I was like, oh crap, Josh never calls me. This must be serious. So I got up and walked out of the class and went outside of the classroom and answered the phone.
Well, I'm glad that you can take the class 2 more times to make sure you didn't miss anything. But yeah, you took my call, and I just assumed that 1, you were busy, and 2, you answered the call because I don't call people.
And you were outraged, and I joined you. I was duly outraged on your behalf.
So yes, so I called you in an absolute tizzy about this. And here's the thing. I say I called you first. I actually dialed my wife first because that's who you call. I called my wife first, but it went straight to voicemail, which tells me she was busy.
Right,
but
and
then,
you needed to vent.
I needed right now. I needed to get this out of me right now before I have a steam explosion and then my cores expose the atmosphere and I start burning down. And so like I called you immediately after that. And while I was on the phone with you, I remember my wife called me back because she knows I don't call people.
Right.
But then I did that thing where you automatically reply a text message to her, like, I'll call you back later, because I was talking to you.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't until later that night that I was describing this to her, and I was writing up these notes to make sure I got all of the details correct.
Yeah.
And then she goes, wait a minute, you didn't take my call because you were talking to Ben?
Oh.
It's so, okay. I told her, like, well, I tried calling you first and you weren't available, so I called Ben. And Ben, this is a direct quote from my wife, Nicole, on November 15th at 8:27 p.m. Did he fulfill your needs, Joshua?
Okay, hang on. Josh, just sit there for a second. I need to talk directly to Nicole.
Okay.
Nicole, if this ever happens again, I promise you, the first question I'll ask Josh is, hang on, Josh, have you talked to Nicole first? Okay, go ahead.
And so anyway, in the way that she's so good at is she was mock outraged that I called you air quotes first because she was unavailable.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. Sorry, Nicole. All right, Josh. This being Thanksgiving week, my family continued a tradition we'd started. When we moved back to the States from overseas, we had some fine adventures doing Thanksgiving overseas. I'll share those stories another time. But since we moved back, I've been closest to I have 4 sisters and a brother, and the next one closest to me in age lived in Illinois when I lived in Illinois. And not deliberately, but almost coincidentally, we established a transition where every year on the 4th of July, my family would go up to her house and we'd have a big party and a barbecue. And then on Thanksgiving, they would come down to our house. They have 4 kids. They're about the same ages as my kids. They get along famously. I love seeing my sister and my brother-in-law and everything. It was great. So this year, when we moved from Illinois down to Louisiana, it was another 600 miles farther, and I was nervous about asking them to come down.
That's a big ask, like we were talking about. Hey, can you drive 600 miles so I can feed you pie?
Yeah. So I was worried about this, and I finally got up the courage to ask her, and she's like, oh, I was afraid you weren't going to ask, which is a good dilemma to have.
That's nice.
So my father had been visiting them because she's remodeling the first floor of her house, and he's good at that kind of thing and retired and loves helping people. So he and my brother-in-law and my sister, so basically 7 people came down and added to our 6, and we had 13 here for Thanksgiving. Well, just before they came down, they'd purchased a new used minivan, and they'd gotten rear-ended and damaged the vehicle just before they left. And the traveling made it complicated, so they couldn't get an estimate and put the car in and stuff.
What is it with your family and the riches getting totaling minivans? What's going on?
So here's the thing. She was stopped at a traffic light and someone crashed into the back of her. And normally this wouldn't even rise to the level where we'd talk about it on the podcast, except for the fact that she told me the rest of the story. And I said, well, what happened? The damage on the van looks kind of high up. What was it? She's like, yeah, it was one of those Tesla SUVs. I said, a what? She said a Tesla. I was like, and she said, and I didn't say this.
Tesla doesn't make an SUV.
They kind of, it's one.
The crossover thing or whatever.
Yeah. It's high enough that the bumper hit the lift gate instead of the bumper, and it dented it in and messed it all up. And she said, and if she had paid her subscription fee to Elon Musk, it would have stopped on its own and not hit me.
Oh, Ben.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we've been talking about.
Can you believe this?
Elon Musk is 100% responsible for the damages to that.
Her car was capable. She was texting and driving. Her car was capable of detecting that the car was stopped at a red light and not hitting it. And because she hadn't paid her subscription fee, her car didn't do what it was capable of and did not prevent the accident.
I am filled with outrage, Ben. This is
outrageous.
You cannot lock safety features behind a paywall. That's ridiculous.
You know who needs to take this on is the insurance company, because the insurance company is going to have to pay for this damage.
Absolutely. I'm flabbergasted. This is a really stupid analogy, but this reminds me of pay-to-win video games. Like when microtransactions in video games first became a thing, the thing to do was to lock the best equipment, the best gear, the best buffs or whatever behind a paywall, so you had to pay for it. And quickly, the entire community rallied against the manufacturers for that, because that's ridiculous, that we just have to pay you more money in order to be competitive at this game. And so now the standard is the only thing that's locked behind paywalls are supposed to be cosmetic. You can be the same skill, everybody has access to the same stuff. It might be a time difference, but everybody can get there. And the only thing that you pay for is things that look better. That's exactly what this needs to be. You can't, every safety feature that vehicle is capable of having should be default.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the heated steering wheel, the heated seats, the how many preset radio stations you get, that's stuff that you can charge for.
Yeah.
Not safety.
So luckily no one was hurt. But my sister's brand new car now, she's got all this headache associated with, making a claim and getting it repaired and it never quite being the same because this safety feature was behind a paywall.
Well, what if it wasn't her minivan? What if it was some kid crossing the street? Somebody could have died because Elon Musk locked a safety feature behind a paywall.
That is one of the interesting coincidences of the way our system works. You know, that bad thing you just described has to happen before things like this change. Somebody has to die at the intersection before the city redirects some funds to make a stoplight.
This is the kind of thing that makes me wish I had the personality and time to create a citizens advocate group.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be able to quit my job and full-time make Elon Musk's life a living hell for this reason.
All right, so that concludes bad at technology.
Is that what that is? Bad at technology?
For bad at logic today, Josh, we haven't done the card for the logical fallacy of bandwagon. Now, everybody uses that word. I think they know what it means. In this context, it is appealing to popularity or the fact that many people do something as an attempted form of validation. We have sayings that go along with this.
If all of your friends jumped off a cliff, would you do it too?
Right. The bandwagon fallacy. Or just because everyone says it's right doesn't make it right.
This happens a lot of times in like the business world. Like, I see these all the time in accounting classes or whatever, these historical accounts of like, oh, the policy is that, you only expense up to this much when you're traveling. But then the corporate culture for this business where it's like, oh yeah, just expense it to travel. It's no big deal. Everybody does it and it's no big deal. Like, you're technically breaking the rules. Everybody knows that you're breaking the rules, but it's accepted culture. And so screw it. I'm just going to go ahead and do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, that's something a little bit different. I mean, it's still just this bandwagon thing, but if we're just talking about whether or not something is actually true, the fact that it's popular has no bearing on its actual validity.
Oh, okay. You're saying people use this as some kind of logical device to try to convince somebody that something that is false is legitimate.
Yes. Just because something's popular doesn't make it right.
Well, Ben, 2% of the population believe the world is flat. Like, those people all can't be wrong.
So
they are.
Or a lot of people believe in leprechauns, so certainly they must exist.
How do people believe in leprechauns? Like, do people actually believe in leprechauns, or are you just saying that?
I don't know. There was the miracle on 34th Street where we had a court case and we tried the validity of Santa Claus just based on the fact that it was a bandwagon fallacy.
I don't know enough of that reference. I hope it's a classic movie. I know, but I don't think I've seen it. But like, if the validity of Santa Claus,
the climax of the movie is they drag Santa Claus into court and try him in front of a judge with a jury and lawyers to prove whether or not he's Santa Claus.
And he's not, right? Like, they clearly...
No. They decide in his favor. He is Santa Claus.
There's no room for superstition in the legal system, Ben. It's broken enough as it is.
But they prove it based on the laws and stuff.
This is the second time I want to slap you through the microphone. I
didn't write Miracle on 34th Street. They haul in a bunch of letters that he gets that are all addressed to him and prove that if you get mail sent to you that's legally addressed to you in your name, that means you're that person and therefore he's Santa Claus. Case closed. Bang the gavel.
What a stupid loophole. All right, so I would be the Grinch in that movie theater, being like, that's not how the legal system works, and it would be terrible if it did.
My favorite quote about the bandwagon fallacy is Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black. When he's sitting there and Jay is trying to get him to tell all the people that the Earth is about to be destroyed by an Arquillian battlecruiser or whatever it is.
Oh, yes. This is a classic little speech that he gives about groupthink.
He says, we can tell all these people they're smart. And he says, a person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that humans were alone on this planet. Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
That's honestly, like, from such a stupid movie, that's like up there in one of the best like little anecdotes or monologues that somebody could have given with such compact and dense truth.
Yeah, the bandwagon fallacy. For Bad English today, I want to tell you about a phrase I heard said that I couldn't think of a good American equivalent for. Maybe you can help me. It is a bag of rags. This was usually said about someone that didn't have their poop in a group.
Didn't have all their poop together. Get your poop and get it together.
But I found other usages of this that was ragbag. A ragbag is kind of supposed to call your mind towards like the thing that your mom has in the corner where she puts the scraps of all the sewing projects she's done. It's just a collection of stuff that doesn't necessarily have any relationship to each other.
Okay.
A group of things which do not have much in common but which are being considered together. Also in formal usage, a scruffy or slovenly person.
Okay, so this is just a bad person, like a bag of rags. Oh, that guy's a bag of rags.
Yeah, I guess we could say, do we say he's a mixed bag?
I mean...
Is it the same thing?
If you're from the 70s, maybe you say that.
Well, saying a mixed bag necessarily means good and bad.
You know what? We actually had a term at the academy. We used to call people poop bags, but with the word that starts with an S. That guy's a poop bag. And like that had a clear defined definition of like, yeah, most of the time it was like just slacking, slovenly appearance, etc., etc.
Yeah. I mean, if we just want to talk about something being various, we might say everything but the kitchen sink. But
that guy's everything but the kitchen sink?
No, we wouldn't say that guy.
Yeah, that guy is like a jack of all trades, but that's usually a positive thing.
That guy's a bag of rags.
Yeah. That sounds just like bad.
Yeah. All right, Josh, with all the family here this week, I want to do a quick board game survivor. Have we ever discussed the game Dominion on the podcast?
Ben, I don't think we have, but I'm so glad that you brought that up.
Oh, good. Okay, so spoiler alert, Dominion's a fantastic game. I freaking love this game.
Okay, so when I play Magic the Gathering, Ben, you know me, I play limited. I want people to give me a random assortment of pile of cards so that my brain can quickly and calculate the most efficient way that I can destroy my opponent with this random collection of things. I want to play that for about an hour, and then I'm going to be sick of it. I want a new pile of random nonsense to try to solve that equation again. Dominion is that exact thing distilled down to its most pure form.
Yeah. So it's just a resource battle where you're just in a race to get the most victory points, and you have resources that you need for acquiring a system for gathering what the game abstracts away as like titles to land.
Yes. Yeah, you're basically competing for resources to buy titles to land. And it's so clever in its mechanics, though. It's a deck building game. And so there's a stack of cards, and all the cards are different things. And it says right on the card what it does. And you start out with the same number of cards, the same type of cards as everybody else. And you use those cards to buy and purchase new cards, which includes these cards that do things and includes the cards that are worth points. The genius thing about this is that whatever you purchase eventually ends up back in your deck so you can draw it and play it out in your future hands. And so as the game is progressing, you're constantly refining and building the mechanism by which you are trying to beat your opponents.
But you're also adding your resources to the deck, which kind of dilute it down. So there's this tension between...
Well, that's the thing. Yes, you can purchase the resources, which allow you to purchase more things. But then the things that you purchase, the things at the end of the game that define whether or not you win or lose, are completely worthless and bury you when you're trying to play the game. And there's always this great transition. You can feel it happen. And I always tell new players, like, you'll know when you need to start buying the victory points because there'll be a switch that flips and everybody will go into a mad dash panic to buy as many points as they can.
Yeah. Yeah, so like you said, inside of this box, and I think they've released like 5 or 6 expansion sets to this thing, but inside of this box are groups of 10 cards that represent just game concepts. A market, a church, a caravan, a thief, a moat around a building. And all these have mechanics that play into the game, and as you go about building your deck, it kind of enhances the playability of it, and it has this incredible amount of variety and replayability, because with one distinct group of cards that you start the game with, there might be a best or a couple best ways to go about winning. But if you change a few of those decks out, then it becomes something completely different.
The box sets come with like a bunch, 30 or 40 sets of these cards, but you only ever play with 10 of them, and you're constantly mixing them up. And as you buy more sets, you have a larger pool to build from. And so the replayability is through the roof. No 2 games of Dominion are ever going to be the same.
Yes. And I want to add that even though we're describing 500 cards and building decks and all this sounds complicated, it is not complicated.
Oh, man, every person I have sat down to teach Dominion, I tell them, Like, I give them the basic rundown of the rules in 5 minutes, and I say, listen, the best way to learn is to sit here and play it. And halfway through the first game, and games last, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Like, halfway
max.
through the first game, it's going to click and be like, oh, I get it. And you will. And you'll just know how the game works after that.
Yep. And I was worried because my wife sometimes she'll like sit down and play a complicated board game with me and get really bogged down in it and mad, and then she won't play a game again with me for like a month or two. And so she sat down to play this game, and I was a little bit nervous, and she got it right away and stuck around all the way to the end, was having a good time, and beat me several times.
Like, if you like complicated, no, not even complicated, if you like card games that are just slightly more complicated than like Hearts, like, definitely look into Dominion. It is one of the best games out there.
Yeah, it rewards curiosity and creativity. But if you don't want to be curious and creative, you can play too.
My sister has this in her head. Like, it doesn't matter what any of the cards say. If there is a card that attacks another player, it says attack on the card. She's just buying that one, and she's going to win. And that's proven right more times than it hasn't.
That's good. I love that a game like that kind of defies maxims. Like, if you say always get the attack cards, that might not necessarily be the best way to win that game.
No, definitely not, depending on what the other 9 stacks of cards are.
So this game is unique. I'd say I haven't played anything that's really like it. It's challenging. There's expansions if you're into that kind of thing, but if you just get the normal box set, it's a great gift this holiday season. The barrier to entry is relatively low. It's got super great replayability. It's easy to pick up, and it's got great variety. Super good game.
Are you aware that I own every expansion of Dominion that exists, and that I have sleeved every one of those cards, and I have created a custom box to carry them all around in with custom dividers that clearly label what each card is?
That is awesome, Josh. No, I didn't. So when I put this game on for Board Game Survivor, I didn't realize I was talking to the CEO of Dominion.
Not quite, but one of the notes you put on here, I remember, like, I remember you put it in here because we were editing the notes at the same time.
I was trying to come up with cons, so I made a list of things that I thought were bad about it. I said there's minimal interaction, you have to shuffle your deck a lot, there's a luck element, and it's a bit unwieldy because there's 500 cards.
So here's the thing, like, a bit unwieldy, like, obviously you haven't swapped out the default box to a custom deck box because, like, if you forget about the box that the game came in and just grab one of the mass storage boxes you have for your Magic cards, you're going to be a much happier person.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to do it, but I'd have to make those custom dividers.
I have on my phone right now saved the plans. One of my long-term woodworking projects is somebody made a Dominion board where it's just a piece of wood that has a spot for all the standard cards for Game of Dominion that they then put on a Lazy Susan. And, like, that is something that I want to make, and that would greatly facilitate playing that game.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Okay, cool. Well, the Bad and Magic podcast highly recommends the game Dominion for any kind of gamer.
Absolutely. Go buy it.
All right, Josh, you and I think, had kind of intended to start this off as a potpourri episode, and here we are at the 2-hour mark, so I'm going to transition into our traditional sign-off.
I don't blame you. Like, I guess this is probably good for, like, a holiday special. Like, after you have a big Thanksgiving meal, you don't want to sit down and, like, read some in-depth thing about something or listen to, like, a long, drawn-out conversation about, like, military ABUs. You just want to have something light and airy that you can drift in and out of, and maybe it's like an after-dinner snack. This
Pie
works.
for breakfast.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, if you had something that you heard us talk about and you want to join in on the discussion, we'd love to hear from you. Go on our subreddit or on our Facebook page and let us hear your voice.
If you like what we do, consider sharing this with a friend. Like, if you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It is unbelievable the visibility we can get from one good review, so please do that if you haven't. If you want to make sure me and Ben talk about these stupidest things, everything from the size of a slice of pie to how Elon Musk is killing your children, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.